You made it. I was waiting. Don't just sit there looking pretty, Mull. Hit like, share this with your crew, drop a comment, and subscribe to Webtoon BL, or I'll send my boys after you.
Chapter 1. The Brush with Despair. The paint on my fingers had dried into a cracked mosaic of cerulean blue and burnt sienna by the time I counted the coins scattered across my kitchen table. $347. That was all that stood between my family and complete annihilation. My mother's hands shook as she poured tea into a chipped mug across from me. She hadn't slept in days. The purple bruises beneath her eyes told me everything her trembling lips couldn't. Eli, maybe we should talk to the bank about. The bank won't give us more time, Mom. I didn't mean for my voice to come out so sharp, so cutting. But the weight of these past 3 months had filed down every soft edge I once possessed. We've already asked. Twice. My sister Maya's laughter drifted down the hallway from her bedroom. That bright, unburdened sound that used to fill our small apartment with warmth. Now it just reminded me of what I was fighting to protect. She was 15, had just started high school, and had no idea that her leukemia was in remission because our family was drowning in $300,000 of medical debt. $300,000. The number had tattooed itself onto the inside of my skull. I was 20 years old, a second-year art student at the city's community college, working part-time at a coffee shop that paid me $12 an hour plus tips. My father had walked out when I was 12, and my mother worked double shifts at a nursing home just to keep us fed. The math didn't work. It would never work. We'll figure something out, my mother said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. Her fingers were rough from years of work, from changing bedpans and lifting patients, from scrubbing floors on her knees because that was what the job demanded. We always do. I didn't have the heart to tell her that we meant me now. Had meant me since I was 15 and realized that hope didn't pay bills. My phone buzzed against the table. A text from an unknown number. The position you inquired about is still available. Tonight at midnight. We're all black. Come alone. Address to follow. I had inquired about nothing. But as I stared at the message, I remembered, 2 nights ago, desperate and half-drunk on cheap whiskey I'd stolen from my roommate's stash, I had posted on some dark web forum I'd found through a rabbit hole of Reddit threads about making fast money. I typed out a message to someone who claimed to know someone who knew someone. I deleted the conversation immediately after, chalking it up to stupidity and tequila. Except apparently, I hadn't deleted it thoroughly enough. What is it? My mother asked, noticing the way my expression had shifted. Nothing. I turned my phone face down on the table. Just a wrong number. But that night, after my mother had gone to sleep and Maya's breathing had evened out into the peaceful rhythm of a teenager deep in dreams, I found myself standing in front of my closet, pulling out the only black shirt and pants I owned. This was stupid. This was dangerous. This was the kind of thing that got people killed in movies, the kind of decision that horror protagonists made right before the credits rolled. But $300,000 didn't care about my safety. The address led me to an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district, a part of the city where even the streetlights seemed to have given up hope. I parked my beat-up Honda Civic 3 blocks away, my heart slamming against my ribs like a caged animal begging to be released. The building looked like nothing. Rusted corrugated steel, broken windows on the upper floors, graffiti claiming territory for a dozen different gangs whose names I didn't recognize. But when I approached the side entrance, a man stepped out of the shadows. He was massive, built like someone who crushed skulls for a living, and his eyes scanned me with the cold efficiency of a predator assessing prey. "You're early," he said. His voice was gravel and menace. "I'm usually early for things." The words came out steadier than I felt. Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe, or surprise that I wasn't cowering. He pulled open the door and gestured me inside. "Down the hall, second door on your left. Someone will explain the rules." The hallway was lit with flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry insects. My footsteps echoed against concrete floors, and the smell of mildew and something metallic, blood, clung to the air. I found the door he'd indicated and stepped through into a room that looked like a backstage area at a high-end fashion show. Mirrors lined the walls, surrounded by vanity lights. Racks of clothing, not just black, but everything from sequined gowns to three-piece suits hung along one side. And there were other people here. Young people. Beautiful people with the kind of faces that belonged on magazine covers or movie screens. A woman approached me. She was stunning in an artificial way. Platinum blonde hair, cheekbones that could cut glass, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "New blood?" she asked, looking me up and down with clinical interest. "You're pretty. Young too. 20. 20, I confirmed, not sure why I was answering. Perfect. The buyers like them young. Not too young, we're not animals. But young enough to still have that freshness. She handed me a piece of paper. "Sign this. It's a contract. You agree to work the auction for one night, you get paid $5,000 cash, no questions asked. You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with, you're just merchandise display, essentially. You walk the stage, you show off the product, you go home." Merchandise. I frowned at the paper. "What am I selling?" She laughed, and the sound was like ice cubes clinking in a glass of poisoned wine. "Honey, you're not selling anything. You are the merchandise." My blood turned to ice. "What?" "We're an auction house. A very special auction house." She leaned closer, and I caught the scent of expensive perfume and something darker underneath. "Our clients are discerning. They don't want paintings or cars or jewelry. They want something more unique. Something living." I dropped the paper like it had burned me. I didn't sign up for this. I was told there was a job. A regular job. There is a job. Standing on that stage, letting people look at you, and then going home with whoever pays the highest price for your company for the next month. She shrugged, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. "It's not forever. You'd be surprised how many people volunteer for this. The money is good. The clients are wealthy, many of them are even kind, in their own way. And you can leave after 30 days with enough cash to solve most of your problems." I was already backing toward the door. "No, absolutely not. I'm leaving." "That's your right." She didn't try to stop me. "But if you walk out that door, you never get invited back. And from the look in your eyes, sweetheart, you need the money. I can always tell. You've got that particular kind of desperation, the kind that comes from watching someone you love suffer." I froze with my hand on the door handle. She continued, her voice softer now, almost gentle. "Your sister, is she sick? Or your mother? Someone you'd die for? Someone you'd do anything for?" She paused. "I've seen that look 1,000 times. Every single person in this room is here because they love someone enough to sell themselves for them. It's nothing to be ashamed of. I should have run. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run. But my feet wouldn't move because she was right. She was absolutely right, and we both knew it. "What's the catch?" I heard myself ask. "The catch is that once you're sold, you belong to the buyer for 30 days. You do what they ask, within reason, we have rules. And at the end of the month, you're free to go with $100,000 in your pocket. No questions asked, no strings attached. You never have to see them again. $100,000. 1/3 of my sister's debt. 1/3 of the weight crushing my family into dust. And if I want to do it again?" Her smile widened. "Then we talk about a different kind of contract. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. One night, 1 month. That's all we're asking." I signed the paper. The next hour was a blur of preparation. Someone styled my hair, pushed it back from my forehead, made it look artfully disheveled rather than just messy. Someone else painted my face with makeup I didn't recognize, sharpening my jawline, darkening my eyes until they looked like pools of something dangerous. They dressed me in black silk pants that cost more than my monthly rent and a sheer black shirt that left absolutely nothing to the imagination. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. That person was a weapon, a tool, pretty thing to be bought and sold. But he was also the only chance my sister had. The auction itself took place in a ballroom I never would have imagined existed behind that crumbling warehouse facade. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. Champagne flutes sparkled on white linen tables. And the people, the buyers, moved through the space with the casual elegance of inherited wealth and old power. There were dozens of them. Men in bespoke suits, women in gowns that probably cost more than my entire apartment building. They sipped champagne and laughed and touched each other's arms as if they were at a gallery opening rather than an underground human auction. And there were others like me, the merchandise, standing in a line along one wall, each of us tagged with a number like we were livestock at a county fair. I was number 7. A man in a tuxedo took the stage. His voice carried through the room without a microphone, rich and commanding. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Emerald Auction. Tonight, we have an exceptional collection for your consideration. As always, the rules are simple. Bid what you're willing to pay, treat your acquisition with respect, and return them in good condition at the end of 30 days. Any breach of these rules will result in permanent revocation of your invitation. Are we understood? A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Then let us begin. They called us up one by one. I watched from the wings as numbers 1 through 6 were paraded across the stage, described like they were fine art, their measurements, their skills, their unique attributes. The bidding was fierce, the numbers climbing into the hundreds of thousands within minutes. Each time the gavel fell, I felt my stomach drop lower and lower, and then it was my turn. Number 7, the auctioneer announced. Eli, 20 years old, art student, described by our scouts as uncommonly beautiful with a fire in his eyes that suggests he'll be trouble. Let's see if our buyers are in the mood for trouble tonight. The lights blinded me as I walked onto the stage. I couldn't see the crowd, could only feel their eyes on me, hundreds of them, cataloging every inch of my body like I was a painting they were considering for purchase. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to run. I wanted to burn this entire place to the ground. But I lifted my chin and met the darkness where their faces should have been, and I didn't let myself tremble. Shall we start the bidding at $50,000? Paddle went up in the front row. 75. Another. 80. 100,000 from the gentleman in the blue tie. A woman's voice, sharp and confident. 150. My heart stopped. $150,000. For me, for 30 days of my life. 200,000. The new voice came from the back of the room, and something about it made every hair on my body stand on end. It was low, almost lazy, but underneath the casual tone was something sharp as a blade. A voice that was used to being obeyed, used to making grown men tremble. The room went quiet. I couldn't see who had spoken, but I could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the sudden tension that descended like a physical weight. The auctioneer's voice lost some of its polish. 200,000 from Mr. Volkov. Do I hear 250? No one spoke. Sold? The auctioneer said quickly, too quickly, as if he was afraid the bidder might change his mind. To Mr. Adrian Volkov for the sum of $200,000. The lights dimmed. Someone grabbed my arm and pulled me off stage. And the last thing I saw before they dragged me through a door and into a hallway was a man rising from a seat in the back corner of the room. He was tall, impossibly tall, with shoulders that seemed to take up the entire doorway. His suit was black, perfectly tailored, and his face was the kind of beautiful that made you think of angels, except angels didn't have eyes as cold as winter in Siberia. He was looking directly at me, and he was smiling. Chapter 2. The Devil's Mansion. They didn't let me change out of the auction clothes. They didn't let me gather my thoughts or catch my breath or even process what had just happened. They simply grabbed me by both arms and marched me through a labyrinth of hallways until we emerged in an underground parking garage that looked like a showroom for luxury cars. A black Rolls-Royce waited with its engine running. A driver stood by the rear door, his expression as blank as a freshly wiped hard drive. "Get in," said one of the men holding me. He wasn't the same guard from the entrance. This one was smaller, weasel-faced, with a nervous energy that made me more scared than if he'd been calm. "Where are you taking me?" "Get in the car." I thought about running. I thought about screaming. I thought about all the things I should have done back in that warehouse, all the moments I'd had to walk away and hadn't taken. But $200,000 was already being wired to an account I'd provided. The contract I'd signed was legally binding, or as legally binding as anything in this underworld could be. And somewhere across the city, my mother was sleeping peacefully, unaware that her son had just sold himself to a man whose name made professional criminals go pale. I got in the car. The interior was obscene. Leather seats that probably cost more than my monthly rent. A minibar stocked with bottles I couldn't pronounce. Ambient lighting that shifted through colors like a slow-motion sunset. I sank into the seat and tried not to think about the fact that I was essentially being driven to my own personal hell. The drive took 45 minutes. We left the city behind, passed through suburbs that got progressively more exclusive, and finally turned onto a private road lined with ancient oak trees. Their branches formed a canopy overhead, blocking out the moonlight, and when we emerged on the other side, I saw it. The mansion. Calling it a mansion felt almost insulting. It was a castle, a sprawling estate of black stone and towering spires, with windows that glittered like dark eyes watching our approach. Iron gates had opened for us without any visible guard, and the driveway curved for a quarter-mile before depositing us at the front entrance. The door opened before the car had fully stopped. A man stood in the doorway. He was older, perhaps 50, with silver at his temples and a butler's uniform that fit him like it had been sewn onto his body. His face was pleasant enough, but his eyes missed nothing. "Mr. Volkov is waiting," he said. "Follow me." I followed. The interior of the mansion was somehow even more overwhelming than the exterior. Marble floors that reflected my footsteps like dark mirrors. Paintings on the walls that I recognized from art history textbooks. Originals, not reproductions, hanging like wallpaper. A chandelier the size of my entire apartment dripped crystals from the ceiling of the grand foyer. We passed through room after room. A library with bookshelves that stretched 2 stories high. A ballroom that could have hosted a presidential inaugural. A conservatory filled with flowers I'd never seen before, their petals glowing faintly in the artificial moonlight. Finally, we reached a set of double doors carved from what looked like solid ebony. The butler knocked twice, waited for a response I didn't hear, and then pushed them open. "Mr. Volkov," he announced, "your guest has arrived." The room was a study. A man's room, all dark wood and leather and the faint smell of expensive cigars. A fire crackled in a massive stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows across the walls. And behind a desk large enough to land a small aircraft on sat the man from the auction, Adrian Volkov. In the dim light of the study, he looked even more dangerous than he had on that stage. His hair was dark, almost black, and fell across his forehead in waves that looked deliberately careless. His cheekbones could have been carved from marble. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, and his lips, full, expressive lips, were curved in that same smile that had haunted me since the auction. But it was his eyes that held me captive. They were gray, the color of storm clouds over a frozen sea, and they looked at me like I was the most interesting thing they'd ever seen. "Eli Hart," he said, and my name on his tongue sounded like a weapon being drawn. "Please, sit." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. I didn't move. "I'd rather stand." "I'm sure you would." His smile widened, and something flickered in those gray eyes. Amusement, maybe, or the anticipation of a challenge. "But I'd rather you sit. And since you're my property for the next 30 days, what I want is what happens." The word hit me like a slap. Property. I'd known what I was signing up for, but hearing it spoken aloud, hearing it applied to me, it was different. It was everything. "I'm not your property," I said, and my voice shook only a little. "I'm a person. I have rights. I have." "You have a contract," he interrupted, still calm, still smiling, still looking at me like I was a puzzle he was eager to solve. "You agreed to this. No one forced you. No one drugged you. No one threatened you or your family." He leaned back in his chair, and the firelight caught the sharp lines of his face. "You came to us. You signed the papers. And now you belong to me until I decide otherwise." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. The contract said 30 days. The contract said 30 days, yes. But contracts can be extended, renegotiated. It all depends on how well you perform. Perform. The word made my skin crawl. "I'm not a circus animal." "No," he agreed, rising from his chair. He was taller than I'd realized, at least 6'4", with the kind of build that suggested he spent as much time in a gym as he did in boardrooms. He rounded the desk and stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something dark and woodsy, with undertones of smoke and leather. "You're something much more interesting. You're a work of art. And I have a particular appreciation for art that talks back." I refused to step back. I refused to give him the satisfaction. But my heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it, could see it hammering against my ribs through this ridiculous sheer shirt they'd put me in. "Art doesn't talk back," I said, lifting my chin. "Art hangs on a wall and doesn't complain when people stare at it." "Exactly." His hand came up, and before I could flinch, his fingers brushed against my cheek. They were cold, freezing, actually, like he'd been holding ice. "Which is why most art bores me. But you, Eli Hart, you're not boring at all, are you?" I jerked my head away from his touch. "Don't touch me." His eyes darkened. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something flash across his face that looked almost like pain. But then it was gone, replaced by that cold, amused smile. "Feisty," he murmured. "I like it. Most of them are too scared to even meet my eyes, let alone pull away from me." He stepped back, giving me space I hadn't asked for but desperately needed. "You'll have your own room. It's down the hall, third door on the right. Nikolai, the butler you met, will show you. There are clothes in the closet, food in the kitchen, and a bathroom with more hot water than you could possibly use. You're not a prisoner here, Eli. You're a guest. An expensive guest, but a guest nonetheless." "What are the rules?" I asked because I needed to know. I needed to understand the boundaries of this cage. His smile sharpened. "That's the thing. There aren't any. I don't need rules to keep people in line. I have something much more effective." "And what's that?" He leaned in close, his lips brushing against my ear as he whispered, "Fear." And then he walked away, disappearing through a door behind his desk, leaving me alone in his study with the fire crackling and my heart racing, and the absolute certainty that I had just made the biggest mistake of my entire life. Nikolai appeared in the doorway. "If you'll follow me, sir." I followed. The room he showed me was bigger than my entire apartment. A king-sized bed dominated one wall, draped in what looked like Egyptian cotton sheets. French doors led out to a balcony that overlooked gardens I couldn't see in the darkness. A fireplace, smaller than the one in the study, but still massive, was already lit, casting warm light across the space. "There are clothes in the armoire," Nikolai said, gesturing to an antique wooden cabinet that probably cost more than my mother's car. "Breakfast is served at 8 in the morning room, but you can also request meals to be brought here. Mr. Volkov's private number is on the phone by the bed, in case of emergencies." He paused. "And if you need anything at all, anything, you can call me. That's what I'm here for." "What happens if I try to leave?" Nikolai's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went cold. "I wouldn't advise that, sir. The property is extensive, and Mr. Volkov's security team is very thorough." "Thorough?" I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Good night, sir." Nikolai inclined his head and left, closing the door behind him. I stood in the middle of that massive room, surrounded by luxury I'd never imagined, and felt absolutely nothing. No relief, no gratitude, no fear even. Just a hollow emptiness that echoed inside my chest like a drum. I changed out of the auction clothes, the sheer shirt, the silk pants, and found a plain t-shirt and sweatpants in the armoire. They were my size. Of course they were my size. They probably had clothes in every size, for every possible guest who might end up here. I thought about calling my mom. My phone had been taken from me at the auction, for security purposes, they'd said, and I hadn't seen it since. I thought about calling Maya, hearing her voice, pretending everything was fine, but everything wasn't fine. Everything was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I lay down on the bed, stared at the ceiling, and didn't sleep. Chapter 3. The first morning. The smell of coffee woke me. I hadn't realized I'd fallen asleep. Hadn't realized my body had finally given in to exhaustion despite my racing mind. But sunlight was streaming through the French doors, golden and warm, and someone had left a tray on the bedside table while I slept. Fresh coffee in a porcelain cup, pastries that were probably still warm, a single red rose in a crystal vase, and a note, written in handwriting that was elegant and sharp and somehow menacing. Breakfast in the morning room at 9. Don't be late. I should have refused. I should have stayed in this room, locked the door, barricaded myself inside until someone explained exactly what was happening and how I could make it stop. But I was hungry and curious, and maybe a little bit stupid. I showered, in a bathroom that had both a rainfall showerhead and a clawfoot tub that could have fit 3 people, and dressed in clothes I found in the armoire. Black jeans that fit perfectly, a soft gray sweater that smelled like cedar, socks that felt like clouds against my feet. Everything in this house was designed to comfort, to seduce, to make you forget that you were a prisoner wearing silk pajamas. I found the morning room by following the sound of classical music. Mozart, I thought, or maybe Haydn. It was smaller than the other rooms I'd seen, intimate in a way that felt almost intentional. A table for 2 sat by a window overlooking a garden that was actually visible in the daylight. Roses, mostly in shades of red and white and deep purple, arranged in patterns that looked like they'd been designed by someone with obsessive attention to detail. Adrian was already seated at the table, reading a newspaper, an actual physical newspaper, which seemed almost quaint coming from a man who probably owned a tech company or 3. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone to reveal a triangle of tan skin. He didn't look up when I entered. "You're late. It's 8:57. The note said 9. You're here at 8:57. That's early, not late." He finally looked up, and those gray eyes pinned me in place. I don't like surprises, Eli, even pleasant ones. When I say 9, I mean exactly 9. Not 8:57. Not 9:03. 9. Then maybe you should have specified that in the note. A beat of silence. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. A real laugh, not the cold, amused sound from last night. It transformed his face, softened the sharp edges, made him look almost human. "You really don't fear me, do you?" "Should I?" "Yes." He folded his newspaper and set it aside. "Everyone else does." "Then maybe everyone else is an idiot." He studied me for a long moment, and I forced myself to hold his gaze. It was hard, harder than I wanted to admit. There was something in his eyes, something ancient and hungry and wild, that made me want to look away, to submit, to apologize for existing in his presence. But I'd spent my whole life not backing down. Not to my father when he'd screamed at my mother. Not to the loan sharks who'd come knocking after my sister's first round of chemo. Not to the art professor who'd told me I'd never make it as a painter because I didn't have the right connections. I wasn't about to start backing down for a pretty face in an expensive suit. "Sit down, Eli." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Eat. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in weeks." He wasn't wrong. Between work and school and hospital visits, I'd been surviving on coffee and protein bars for longer than I cared to admit. But I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of being right. "I'm not hungry." "Liar." He picked up his own coffee cup and took a slow sip, watching me over the rim. "Your stomach growled when you walked in. I heard it from across the room." "Damn it." I sat down, mostly because standing felt like admitting defeat. The pastries were still warm, croissants, pain au chocolate, something that looked like it had raspberries and cream inside. My mouth watered despite myself. Adrian pushed the tray toward me. "Eat. You're not going to poison me? If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead." He said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. "Eat. You're no good to me if you collapse from malnutrition." I grabbed a croissant and bit into it. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted, flaky and buttery and perfect. I tried not to moan, but some sound must have escaped, because Adrian's expression shifted into something I couldn't read. "Good?" he asked. "Fine." "Liar," he said again, but this time his voice was softer, almost gentle. "You can be honest with me, Eli. I'm not the monster you think I am." "What are you, then?" He considered the question for a long moment. Outside, the morning light caught the roses in the garden, making them glow like living jewels. A bird sang somewhere in the distance, a cheerful sound that felt wildly inappropriate for this conversation. "I'm a businessman," he finally said. "I run certain enterprises, some legal, some less so. I have enemies, many enemies, and I've stayed alive this long by being smarter than them, faster than them, and more ruthless than they could ever imagine." He set down his coffee cup. "But I'm also a man who appreciates beauty, who collects it, protects it, cherishes it. And you, Eli Hart, are the most beautiful thing I've seen in a very long time." My face flushed. I hated that it flushed, hated that my body was betraying me with this visible sign of embarrassment. "That's not. You don't even know me. You can't just. I can do whatever I want." His voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath it. "I bought you. You're mine. Those are the facts of this situation. You can fight them, you can resent them, you can spend the next 30 days hating me with every fiber of your being. But you can't change them." I set down the croissant. I wasn't hungry anymore. Why me? Why not one of the others? There were prettier people on that stage. More compliant people. Why did you spend $200,000 on someone who's clearly going to fight you every step of the way? Adrian leaned back in his chair, and for a moment, something vulnerable flickered across his face. A crack in the mask, a glimpse of the man beneath the monster. "Because you looked at me," he said quietly, "like I was a person, not a monster, not a meal ticket, not a way out of your problems. Just a person." I stared at him. "What?" "Everyone who comes to that auction, the buyers, the sellers, the merchandise, they all look at me with fear or greed or desperation. But you," he shook his head slowly, "you looked at me like you were disappointed, like you expected better from me, like I'd failed some test I didn't even know I was taking. I don't. No one has ever looked at me like that before," he continued as if I hadn't spoken. "No one has ever dared." And I realized in that moment that I would do anything to see that look again, to understand it, to understand you. The confession hung in the air between us, heavy and strange. This wasn't what I'd expected. I'd expected threats, demands, the casual cruelty of a man who was used to getting whatever he wanted. I hadn't expected whatever this was. "You're insane," I said finally. "Probably." He smiled again, and this time there was something almost sad in it. "But you already knew that when you signed the contract." He stood up, smoothing down his suit jacket. "I have meetings this morning. Nikolai will show you around the property. You're free to go anywhere except the East Wing and my private study. There's an art studio in the West Wing, fully stocked. I was told you're a painter. You researched me. I always research my investments." He paused at the door, looking back at me over his shoulder. "Eli, one more thing." "What?" "Don't try to escape. Not because my security will catch you, they will, but that's not the reason. Don't try to escape because there are people out there who would love to hurt you just to hurt me. And I would regret that. Deeply." He left before I could respond. I sat in that morning room for a long time, surrounded by roses and sunlight and the ghost of his words. "I would regret that. Deeply." It should have sounded like a threat. It should have made me more afraid, more determined to find a way out. Instead, it sounded almost like a promise. Chapter 4: The Art of Defiance. The art studio in the West Wing was a dream I hadn't known I was allowed to have. Natural light flooded through a wall of windows that faced north, the optimal direction for painting, I realized with a jolt. Someone who knew art had designed this space. The easels were professional grade, the kind that cost thousands of dollars and could be adjusted to any angle. Canvases of every size leaned against the walls in neat stacks. And the supplies, I opened a drawer and nearly wept. Oil paints from Italy, watercolors from Japan, brushes made from the hair of Kalinsky sable, so expensive that art students only dreamed of owning them. Charcoal sticks, pastels, pencils, markers. Everything an artist could possibly want, organized with military precision. Adrian Volkov might be a monster, but he was a monster who understood art supplies. I spent the next 3 hours painting. I didn't plan it, Didn't choose a subject or mix my palette or do any of the careful preparation I'd been taught in school. I simply grabbed a brush and started, letting whatever was inside me pour out onto the canvas. When I finally stepped back, my hands aching and my eyes burning, I saw what I'd created. It was a face. Adrian's face. But not the Adrian from the auction or the morning room. Not the cold, controlled monster who spoke in threats wrapped in silk. This Adrian was younger, softer, his eyes filled with something that looked like longing. The brushstrokes were rougher than I usually worked, almost frantic, as if I'd been trying to capture something that kept slipping away. What is this? I spun around. Adrian stood in the doorway of the studio, still in his suit but with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. He was staring at the painting with an expression I couldn't read, something between fascination and fury. "It's nothing," I said quickly, reaching for the canvas to turn it away. "Don't." His voice cracked like a whip, and I froze. He walked toward me, his footsteps silent on the polished floor, and stopped in front of the easel. "You painted this in 3 hours?" "About 3 hours, yeah. You've never seen me before last night." "So?" He turned to look at me, and his eyes were blazing. "So how did you paint this? How did you capture something I've never shown anyone? This?" He gestured at the canvas, at the vulnerable version of himself I'd unknowingly created. "This doesn't exist. This person doesn't exist." "Then why did I paint him?" The question hung between us, heavy and impossible. Adrian stared at me and I stared back, and neither of us spoke. Finally, he reached out and touched my face. The same gesture as last night, but different somehow. Slower, more deliberate. His cold fingers traced my cheekbone, my jaw, the edge of my lips. "You're dangerous," he whispered. "Do you know that? You're the most dangerous thing that's ever happened to me. I'm a 20-year-old art student with $37 in my bank account. I'm not dangerous. You're dangerous because you make me feel things I've spent my entire life learning not to feel." His thumb brushed across my lower lip, and I forgot how to breathe. "You make me want things I can't have. You make me want to be someone I'm not. Then don't." I should have pulled away. I should have slapped his hand aside, told him to keep his distance, reminded him that I was his property, not his partner. But his touch was warm now. When had it become warm? And I couldn't make myself move. "Be who you are. Do what you do. I'm not asking you to change. But you are." He leaned closer, and I could feel his breath against my skin, could smell that dark cologne and something underneath, something that was just him. "Every time you look at me with those eyes, every time you argue with me, every time you refuse to be afraid, you're asking me to be better. And I don't know if I can. Maybe that's not my problem." He laughed. That real laugh again, the one that made him look human. "Maybe it's not." His hand dropped from my face, and he stepped back, putting distance between us. "The painting stays. I want it. It's not finished." "Then finish it." He walked toward the door, then paused. "Eli." "What?" "If anyone ever asks, anyone, you never painted this. You never saw this version of me. Do you understand?" I understood. Who would ask? He didn't answer. He just walked away, leaving me alone with the painting and the ghost of his touch and the terrifying realization that I didn't want him to go. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in that massive bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the day. The breakfast, the studio, the way his fingers had felt against my lips, the way he'd looked at the painting, like I'd reached into his chest and pulled out his heart without permission. I thought about my family, about my mother working double shifts, about my sister laughing in her bedroom, about the debt that still loomed over all of us like a guillotine blade. $200,000 would help, but it wouldn't solve everything. We'd still owe $100,000. We'd still be drowning, just slightly less deeply. I thought about what would happen at the end of 30 days. Would he let me go? Would he extend the contract? Would I want him to? And underneath all of that, underneath the fear and the confusion and the growing attraction I refused to name, there was something else, something darker. I was starting to like him, not the monster, Not the cold, ruthless mafia boss who bought people like paintings, but the man beneath, the one who laughed like he'd forgotten how, the one whose eyes had softened when I'd painted his hidden self, the one who touched me like I was something precious, something worth protecting. That man was dangerous in a completely different way. I finally fell asleep around 3 in the morning, and my dreams were filled with gray eyes and cold fingers and the sound of his voice saying, "You're mine," like it was a prayer instead of a threat. Chapter 5: The First Crack. 3 days passed. 3 days of breakfast in the morning room, of painting in the studio, of Adrian watching me from doorways with those unreadable eyes. 3 days of Nikolai bringing me anything I asked for and pretending not to notice when I asked about the security patrols, the gate codes, the weak points in the property's defenses. 3 days of learning that Adrian Volkov was not what I'd expected. I'd expected a monster, tyrant, a man who would lock me in a basement and visit me only when he wanted something dark and degrading. Instead, I got a man who brought me cups of tea when I was painting too long without a break, who left art books outside my door with pages marked, "Thought you might like this one," who sat in silence beside me in the garden, not speaking, just present. Instead, I got a man who flinched when I touched him accidentally, who went rigid when our shoulders brushed in hallways, who looked at me like I was a fire he desperately wanted to burn himself on but was terrified of the ashes. He hadn't kissed me, hadn't tried to touch me beyond those brief, almost accidental caresses, hadn't demanded anything physical at all, and somehow that made everything worse. "Are you going to tell me why you bought me?" I asked on the 4th morning, over coffee and croissants. "The real reason?" Adrian looked up from his newspaper. He read it every morning, cover to cover, like an old man in a coffee shop rather than a crime lord in a castle. "I told you the real reason. You told me you bought me because I looked at you like a person. That's not a reason. That's a feeling." "It was a reason to me." I set down my coffee cup. "I'm not stupid, Adrian. I know how this works. Men like you don't spend $200,000 on someone just because they have pretty eyes and a smart mouth. You have an agenda. What is it?" He was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the roses swayed in the morning breeze, and somewhere in the distance, I heard the sound of birds singing, carefree, oblivious to the tension in this room. "Enemies," he finally said. "I have many enemies. Some of them have been looking for a weakness, a way to hurt me. For years, they've tried everything: assassins, bribes, threats against my associates. Nothing has worked. And you think I'm a weakness? I think you could be." He met my eyes, and there was something raw in his expression, something he clearly didn't want me to see. "I think if anyone found out about you, about how I feel when I'm around you, they would use you to destroy me. And I can't let that happen." "How you feel?" I repeated. "You've known me for 4 days. 4 days, and you've already painted a version of me that I've never shown anyone. 4 days, and you've already made me laugh more than I have in the past year. 4 days, and I already know that losing you would break something inside me that I'm not sure can be fixed." My heart was pounding. This wasn't supposed to be happening. He was supposed to be cold, cruel, easy to hate. He wasn't supposed to say things like that, wasn't supposed to look at me like I was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. "You don't know me," I said, but my voice was weaker now, less certain. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're an art student who works at a coffee shop to help support your family. I know your sister had leukemia and is now in remission. I know your father left when you were 12 and you've been the man of the house ever since. I know you haven't painted anything for yourself in 2 years because you've been too busy taking care of everyone else." I stared at him. "You did more research than you admitted." "I did all the research. I know everything about you, Eli Hart. Every accomplishment, every failure, every secret you think you've hidden from the world." He leaned forward, and his eyes were burning. "And despite all of that, despite knowing exactly who you are and where you come from, I still want you. Not as property, not as a possession, as something I can't even put into words." The air between us was electric. I could feel myself leaning toward him, could feel the pull of something deeper than attraction, stronger than fear. "You can't just say things like that," I whispered. Why not? Because it makes me want to trust you. And I can't trust you. You're a criminal. You buy people. You're the villain in every story I've ever been told. Maybe. He reached across the table and took my hand in his. His fingers were warm now. When had that changed? And they intertwined with mine like they belonged there. Or maybe I'm just a man who's never had a reason to be good until now. I should have pulled away. I should have laughed in his face, told him that villains didn't get redemption arcs, that monsters didn't get to fall in love with their victims. Instead, I held on. And for the first time since I'd walked into that warehouse, I felt something that wasn't fear or desperation or hopelessness. I felt hope. The kiss came 3 days later. We were in the studio. I was painting. A landscape this time, something safe and distant, a mountain range I'd never seen except in photographs. Adrian was sitting in a chair by the window, pretending to read a book but actually watching me with those impossible gray eyes. Your brushstrokes change when you're thinking about something, he said without looking up from his book. What? When you're focused, your strokes are long and smooth. But when your mind drifts, when you're thinking about something else, they get shorter. More jagged. He finally looked at me. Right now, you're thinking about something else. What is it? You, I thought. I'm always thinking about you. Nothing important. Liar. You say that a lot. Because you lie a lot. He set down his book and stood up, walking toward me with that predatory grace that made my breath catch. Tell me what you're thinking, Eli. I set down my brush. I'm thinking that this is insane. That I've been here for a week, and I don't know anything about you except what I've painted and what you've chosen to tell me. I'm thinking that I should hate you, but I don't. I'm thinking that I should be planning my escape, but instead I'm planning how to get you to smile again. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could see the individual shades of gray in his eyes, storm clouds and sea foam and something that looked almost like longing. And, he prompted, and I'm thinking that I want you to kiss me. The words hung in the air between us, impossible to take back. I saw something shift in his expression. Surprise, hunger, and underneath it all, a terrifying vulnerability. Eli, if you don't want to, that's fine. I needed to say it. I needed you to know that He kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was the kiss of a man who'd been starving for something his whole life and had finally been given permission to eat. His hands cupped my face, tilted my head back, and his mouth claimed mine like I was oxygen and he was drowning. I made a sound, something between a gasp and a moan, and his tongue swept into my mouth, tasting me, learning me. One of his hands slid into my hair, gripping hard enough to hurt, and the pain just made everything more intense. This was madness. This was the worst decision I'd ever made. This was a man who bought people, who killed people, who ruled through fear and violence and the promise of pain. But his lips were soft against mine. His body was warm where it pressed against me. And when he pulled back, finally, both of us breathing hard, his eyes were bright with something I'd never seen before. Again, I whispered. He smiled, that real smile, the one that made him look human. As many times as you want. And he kissed me again. Chapter 6. The Enemy Within. The first sign that something was wrong came on the 10th day. I was in the garden, sketching the roses, when I heard raised voices from inside the mansion. Adrian's voice. Cold, controlled. The voice he used when he was barely containing his rage. And another voice I didn't recognize, higher and more frantic. I shouldn't have gone inside. I knew I shouldn't have gone inside. But curiosity has always been my fatal flaw, and I'd spent 10 days in this beautiful prison with nothing to do but paint and think and fall dangerously in love with my captor. I found them in the study. Adrian was behind his desk, his expression carved from ice, and standing in front of him was a man I'd never seen before. Sleek, well-dressed, with the kind of smile that made you want to check your wallet. "Ah," the man said, turning to look at me as I entered. "The famous Eli. I was wondering when I'd get to meet you." Adrian's eyes flashed. "Eli, leave. Now." "I'm not. Now." The man laughed. "Don't be rude, Adrian. The boy deserves to know what's happening. After all, He's the reason we're having this conversation. I don't know who you are, I said, walking further into the room despite Adrian's obvious fury, or why you're here. But if you have something to say to me, say it. The man's smile widened. I'm Dmitry Volkov, Adrian's older brother. He extended a hand, and when I didn't take it, he didn't seem offended. And I'm here to warn you that my brother's affection is the most dangerous thing in the world. Not because of what he'll do to you, though that's certainly a concern, but because of what others will do to you because of him. Adrian stood up so fast his chair fell backward. Dmitry, leave, now, or I will make you leave. You can't make me do anything, little brother. I'm family. Dmitry's eyes never left mine. The Petrov family has put a price on your head, Eli. $1 million, dead or alive. They think killing you will weaken Adrian. And they're probably right. The world tilted. $1 million, dead or alive. You're lying, I said, but my voice came out strangled. I wish I was. Dmitry pulled an envelope from his jacket and tossed it onto Adrian's desk. That's proof. Intelligence from our sources inside the Petrov organization. They know about you. They know where you are. And they're planning to hit the estate within the week. Adrian grabbed the envelope, ripped it open, and scanned the contents. His face went pale, paler than I'd ever seen it, and then it went dark. The kind of dark that made me understand why people feared him. How did they find out? His voice was barely a whisper. Dmitry shrugged. Someone talked. Someone always talks. The question is what you're going to do about it. I'm going to kill every single one of them. That's your solution to everything. Dmitry turned to leave, then paused at the door. Eli, one piece of advice. Run. Run now, run far, and never look back. That's the only way you'll survive loving a Volkov. He left. The silence he left behind was deafening. Adrian stood behind his desk, staring at the papers in his hand like they contained his own death sentence. His knuckles were white, his jaw was clenched, and when he finally looked at me, his eyes were red-rimmed. I'm sorry, he said. This is my fault. I should have been more careful. I should have. Stop. I walked around the desk and stood in front of him. Is it true? Is there really a price on my head? Yes. $1 million? Yes. And they're coming here? He nodded, and something in his expression shattered. I can protect you. I have the best security money can buy. I have an army of men who would die for me. I can. Can you guarantee that none of them will get through? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We both knew that no security was perfect, that there was always a weak point, always a way in. I'm not running, I said. Adrian blinked. What? You heard me. I'm not running. I'm not leaving you to face this alone. I reached up and touched his face, the way he'd touched mine a dozen times before. You said I was yours. Well, you're mine too now, and I don't abandon what's mine. He stared at me like I'd just spoken in a language he didn't understand. Eli, if they take you, if they hurt you, I will burn this city to the ground. I will kill everyone they've ever loved. I will. Then make sure they don't take me. I pressed my forehead against his. Fight with me, Adrian. Not for me. With me. For a long moment he didn't move. Then his arms came around me, crushing me against his chest, and he buried his face in my hair. I can't lose you, he whispered. I've only known you for 10 days, and I can't lose you. Then don't. We stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the shadow of the threat that was coming for us. And for the first time since I'd arrived at this mansion, I didn't feel like a prisoner. I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Chapter 7, The Siege. They came on the 13th night. I was in the studio, putting the finishing touches on the portrait of Adrian, the one he'd forbidden me to show anyone. He'd become something of a muse to me over the past 2 weeks, and the painting had evolved from a rough sketch into something almost transcendent. The vulnerable version of him I'd captured on that first day was still there, but now there was something else in his eyes, something that looked almost like hope. The first gunshot shattered the silence. I dropped my brush and ran to the window. Below, the gardens were alive with movement. dark figures swarming over the walls, security lights blazing, the crack of gunfire echoing off the stone. This wasn't a small assault. This was an army. The door burst open, and Adrian was there, his suit jacket gone, a gun in each hand. His face was streaked with something that looked like blood. Not his, I realized with relief, and his eyes were wild. Eli, we have to go. Now. What's happening? The Petrovs. They brought more men than we anticipated. My security is holding them off, but not for long. He grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the door. There's a safe room in the basement. You'll be protected there until... I'm not hiding in a basement while you fight. Yes, you are. His grip tightened. This isn't a negotiation, Eli. You're the target. If they get you, they win. I can't let them win. You can't. Another gunshot, closer this time. Adrian swore in what sounded like Russian and dragged me into the hallway. We ran, through the study, through the kitchen, through a door I'd never noticed before that led to a spiral staircase descending into darkness. The basement was cold and smelled of earth and old stone. Adrian pulled me into a room that looked like a bunker. Concrete walls, steel door, monitors showing camera feeds from around the property. Stay here, he said, pushing me toward a cot in the corner. Don't open the door for anyone except me. Anyone. Do you understand? Adrian, do you understand? His voice cracked, and I saw fear in his eyes. Not for himself, but for me. Real, genuine fear. I understand. He kissed me then, hard and desperate and full of everything he couldn't say. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. I'll come back for you, he said. I promise. And then he was gone, and I was alone in the dark, listening to the sounds of a war being fought above my head. The minutes stretched into hours. I watched the monitors, my heart in my throat, as the battle raged. Adrian's men were good, well-trained, well-armed, fiercely loyal, but the Petrovs had brought numbers. Wave after wave of attackers swarmed the property, and despite everything, they kept coming. I saw Adrian on one of the cameras, moving through the gardens like a force of nature. He was terrifying in battle, efficient, brutal, absolutely without mercy. Men fell before him like wheat before a scythe, and he didn't even slow down. But there were so many of them. So many. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Dmitri, Adrian's brother, walking through the carnage like he was taking a stroll in the park. And behind him, held at gunpoint by two massive guards, was Nikolai, the butler, the one who had brought me tea and showed me to my room and pretended not to notice when I asked about escape routes. He was the mole. He was the one who had sold me out. No, I whispered, watching as Dmitri approached the house. No, no, no. The door to the safe room exploded inward. I didn't have time to run. Didn't have time to hide. One moment I was standing in the middle of the room, and the next, hands were grabbing me, dragging me, pulling me toward the staircase. Found him, someone said into a radio. We have the package. Moving to extraction point. I fought. I kicked and screamed and bit and clawed, but there were too many of them and they were too strong. They dragged me up the stairs, through the ruined kitchen, out into the garden where bodies lay scattered across the grass like fallen leaves. And there, standing in the middle of it all, was Dmitri. Eli, he said, smiling that horrible smile. So nice to see you again. I'm sorry it has to be like this, but business is business. Adrian will kill you, I spat. Adrian is currently fighting for his life in the East Wing. By the time he realizes you're gone, you'll already be on your way to the Petrovs. And by the time he finds you, he shrugged. Well, let's just say I wouldn't get attached to your face. They shoved me into the back of a black van. The doors slammed shut. The engine roared to life. And through the small window at the back of the van, I watched the mansion disappear into the night. Chapter 8. The Price of Obsession. The Petrovs' compound was everything Adrian's mansion wasn't. Where his had been elegant, refined, almost beautiful, this place was brutal and functional. Concrete walls, steel doors, floodlights that burned the darkness away. They dragged me through corridors that smelled of bleach and fear, past rooms where I could hear screaming, until they threw me into a cell with nothing but a concrete floor and a metal toilet. I sat in the corner and tried not to shake. They would kill me. Or worse, Adrian had told me about the Petrovs, about their reputation for cruelty, for creativity, for turning pain into an art form. They wouldn't just murder me. They would take their time. They would send pieces of me to Adrian one by one until he shattered. And he would shatter. I knew he would, because despite everything, despite the violence and the darkness and the blood on his hands, he loved me. I could see it in his eyes every time he looked at me, feel it in his touch every time he reached for me. I loved him too. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I loved Adrian Volkov. I loved the monster who had bought me, who had kissed me, who had promised to come back for me. I loved him in a way that made no sense, that defied all logic and reason and self-preservation. And I was going to die without ever telling him. The door opened. I expected Dmitri or one of the Petrovs or some faceless torturer with a box of tools. Instead, a woman walked in, tall, elegant, with silver hair and eyes the color of emeralds. She was beautiful in the way ancient things were beautiful, all sharp edges and faded glory. "You're Eli," she said. It wasn't a question. "Who are you?" "Anastasia Petrov, the head of this family." She sat down on the floor across from me, heedless of her expensive dress. "I wanted to see you for myself, the boy who made Adrian Volkov fall in love. I didn't make him do anything. No, you just existed." She studied me with those green eyes, and I felt like she was seeing through my skin, through my bones, into the very core of me. "He's killed 17 of my men tonight. 17. Do you know what that means? That he's good at his job? That he's obsessed." She leaned forward. "Obsession is dangerous, Eli. It makes people do irrational things. It makes them vulnerable. And I've been waiting for Adrian Volkov to be vulnerable for 20 years. So this is about him, not me. Everything is about him." She stood up, brushing off her dress. "You're just the tool I'm going to use to destroy him." She left. I sat in the darkness and waited for dawn. Dawn came with gunfire. I heard it before I felt it. The distant crack of rifles, the closer roar of explosions, the screaming. Lots and lots of screaming. The walls of my cell shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. And through the small window in the door, I saw flames. He'd come for me. Adrian had come for me. The door didn't explode inward. It was torn off its hinges, ripped away by what looked like inhuman strength. And standing in the doorway, covered in blood and soot and something that might have been brains, was Adrian. He wasn't beautiful anymore. He wasn't elegant or refined or controlled. He was a nightmare given flesh, a demon summoned from the deepest pit of hell. And his eyes found mine and they softened. "Eli," he said, and his voice broke on my name. "Eli, I'm here. I'm here." He crossed the cell in 3 strides and pulled me into his arms. I clung to him, sobbing, not caring that his clothes were wet with blood, not caring that we were surrounded by death and destruction. "You came," I whispered. "I will always come." He pulled back, cupping my face in his hands, and his eyes were wild with something that looked like madness. "I will burn the world down for you, Eli Hart. Every city, every country, every person who ever threatens you. I will burn it all. I don't want you to burn the world." "Then what do you want?" I looked at him, really looked at him, at the blood on his face, the terror in his eyes, the love that was written in every line of his body. "I want you," I said. "Just you. Alive. With me. That's all I've ever wanted." He kissed me then, in that concrete cell surrounded by fire and death, and it was nothing like the kisses before. It was softer, slower, more careful. It was a promise and a prayer and a beginning. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. "Let's go home," he said. And for the first time, the word home didn't feel like a cage. Felt like freedom. Chapter 9, The Confession. The mansion was destroyed. Not completely. The stone walls still stood. The towers still reached toward the sky. But the inside was a wreckage of bullet holes and broken glass and blood that no amount of cleaning would ever fully erase. Adrian didn't seem to care. He carried me through the ruins, past bodies being loaded onto stretchers, past Nikolai's corpse lying in the foyer with a bullet hole between his eyes. He carried me up the stairs to his bedroom, the one I'd never been allowed to enter, and laid me on his bed like I was something precious. "Sit," he said. "Don't move. I need to check you for injuries. I'm not hurt. Let me be sure." He checked me anyway, gently, carefully, his hands trembling as they moved over my body. When he was satisfied that I was whole, he sat back on his heels and stared at me. "I thought I lost you," he said. "When I got to the safe room and you were gone. I thought I lost you. You didn't. I know." He reached out and touched my face, tracing the lines of my cheekbones, my jaw, my lips. "I killed Dmitri." I wasn't surprised. "Was it hard?" "No." His eyes met mine. "Nothing is hard when it comes to protecting you. I would kill my entire family if they threatened you. I would kill myself if that's what it took." "Don't say that. It's the truth." He sat on the bed beside me, pulling me against his chest. "I've never loved anyone before, Eli. I've never let myself. Love is weakness, or so I was taught. Love is a chain that your enemies can use to drag you down. And now I understand that love is the only thing that makes any of this worth it." He pressed a kiss to my hair. "The power, the money, the fear, none of it matters. Not without you." I pulled back to look at him. "I love you." He froze. "I love you," I said again, because once wasn't enough, because he needed to hear it, because I needed to say it. "I love you, Adrian Volkov. I love the monster and the man. I love the way you look at paintings and the way you drink your coffee and the way you smile when you think I'm not watching. I love you, and I'm terrified, because I've never felt anything like this before." His eyes were bright with tears. "Eli, I'm not saying it to make you say it back. I'm saying it because it's true. Because I almost died without telling you, and I never want to make that mistake again." He kissed me, gently, sweetly, nothing like the desperate kisses of before. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. "I love you too," he whispered. "I've loved you since the moment you looked at me like I was a person instead of a monster. I've loved you through every argument, every defiance, every time you refused to be afraid of me. I love you, and I don't deserve you, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. Then we'll spend the rest of our lives being worthy of each other." He smiled, that real smile, the one that made him look human. "Deal." We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the ruins of his bedroom, while the sun rose on a new day and the bodies were cleared away and the world moved on without us. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the future. I was ready for it. Chapter 10. A new beginning. 30 days came and went. The contract was destroyed. Adrian burned it himself in the fireplace of his study, while I watched. "You're not my property," he said. "You never were. You're my partner, my equal, my everything." The debt was paid. Adrian had wired the remaining $100,000 to my mother's account without telling me, and when she called, crying, asking where the money had come from, I told her the truth. Not all of it, never all of it, but enough. "I met someone," I said. "Someone rich. Someone who wants to take care of us." "Is he kind to you?" my mother asked. I thought about Adrian's hands, gentle on my face, his eyes soft when they looked at me, his voice whispering my name like a prayer. "Yes," I said. "He's kind." "Then I'm happy for you, Eli. That's all I've ever wanted. For you to be happy." Maya wanted to meet him. I told her soon, not yet, that he was busy with work. She pouted but accepted it, and when Adrian heard about the conversation, he laughed. That real laugh, the one I was collecting like precious jewels. "Your sister sounds like a handful," he said. "She's 15. She's supposed to be a handful. Then I look forward to meeting her. When you're ready." He never pushed. That was the thing about Adrian Volkov that surprised me most. For a man who was used to taking whatever he wanted, he was endlessly patient with me. He waited for me to come to him, to say I love you first, to decide when I was ready to tell my family about us. He waited, and he loved me, and slowly, piece by piece, I stopped being afraid. 6 months later, I painted something new. It was us, Adrian and me, standing in the garden where we'd first kissed. The roses were in bloom around us, red and white and deep purple, and the morning light was golden on our faces. In the painting, Adrian was smiling. Not the cold smile, not the amused smile, but the real one. The one that made his eyes crinkle at the corners and his whole face soften. I'd never painted anything more beautiful. "Is that how you see me?" he asked, coming up behind me in the studio. "That's how you are." He wrapped his arms around my waist and rested his chin on my shoulder. "I love it. I love you. I love you too." And in that moment, surrounded by paint and canvas and the man I'd never expected to find, I realized that the auction hadn't been the worst thing that ever happened to me. It had been the best, because it had led me here, to this studio, to this man, to this life I'd never dared to dream of. Adrian Volkov was a monster, killer, a crime lord whose hands were stained with blood I'd never fully know about. But he was also mine, and I was his, and that, I decided, was enough. Epilogue. 1 year later, I stood in a gallery in the heart of the city, surrounded by my paintings. My first solo show. The critics were raving, the buyers were clamoring, and every piece had already been sold. Adrian stood in the corner, watching me with those impossible gray eyes. He'd bought half the paintings himself, through intermediaries, because he couldn't bear the thought of anyone else owning the versions of me that existed on canvas. I pretended not to know. He pretended not to know that I knew. It was our little game. "Mr. Hart." A young woman approached me, her face flushed with excitement. "I'm a reporter from the Chronicle." I was wondering, the painting in the center of the room, the one of the man in the garden. Who is he? He seems so alive. I looked at the painting. Adrian, smiling, surrounded by roses, his eyes filled with love. "My muse," I said. Behind me, I heard Adrian's soft laugh, and I smiled.
Thanks for watching Webtoon BL. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and come back for more. Don't make me come find you.